Remember, the kids are watching.
Being recorded.
Okay, folks, let's do it. Good evening, Democrats.
Good
evening,
Democrats.
Democrats.
Hold on, let's get some of those mute buttons off.
Hello.
Okay, let's try it again. Good evening, Democrats.
Democrats.
Okay,
Good evening.
that was better. Good job, everybody. Okay, so welcome. This is our big meeting. It's expanded over the years. I remember my first Democratic Club meeting in 2010 was the meeting where we did all 4 races for the school board, the college board, the rent control board, the city council, and the ballot measures, and voted all in one night before the library kicked us out. And some of you may have been here long enough to remember when we would be counting the ballots out in the parking lot of the library because we did get kicked out and we still had to finish the meeting. So, what we've done over the last couple cycles have expanded it because we really want to give the correct amount of time to all these races and not just rush through them, and really focus on the issues that are important here in Santa Monica. Some people were just saying before we started the meeting that they didn't really know a lot of the candidates who are running this year. That happens every couple of cycles when a lot of incumbents aren't running. So it's great to have the opportunity to get to meet all the new faces in Santa Monica. And whether you win or lose or run again next time, it's such a great part of the Santa Monica political scene is these meetings. And I remember, some of the people who are here in this meeting I met for the first time at this annual meeting of the debates and the forums that we do back in 2010. And Tom, I'm sure that was the first time I met you. Hara, a lot of people who are here. So, it's great to continue this tradition as a club every cycle. And just to review, we're going to just take a look at this graphic that Dan made. We have our schedule here tonight. We're going to do in this order: the rent control board, the SMC board, Santa Monica College, and then the school board debate in that order tonight. And then we'll come back next Wednesday, week from tonight, and we're going to focus on the city council. We have a lot of the candidates who are running for city council will be here. And finally, we'll do the local ballot measures discussion that night. Take 1 week off when the board is going to be meeting to deliberate on some of our recommendations for this fall based on what we see in these debates tonight and next week. And then on the 28th, we are going to have our big meeting where we actually vote to endorse in all of these races. So all 4 Santa Monica races, all the ballot measures, and also I should mention Isabel's going to be leading us in the state ballot measure discussion. We have some pretty interesting ballot measures this year. We're going to hear from some of the proponents and opponents from those. So we have a big program. We could not contain it to just one night. So we expanded it into 3 nights. And if you missed any of it, it's all going to be on YouTube. And we're going to be able to share what we're doing here tonight with everybody so that before we get to September 28th, if you have to miss half of this meeting or all of the next meeting or something, you can come back, watch it, and have all the information you need from us to make your decision about how you want to cast your endorsement vote. So that's the process, and we'll get to the process of actually voting on the 28th, but it's very easy. It's called Election Buddy. We've done it for the last cycle. We did it for the primary. You get a ballot in your email, and it's very convenient. So with that, we're going to kick off our first event here. Oh yeah, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, John. Could you just or could everyone please mute themselves? Or John,
I'll take care of it.
Everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, all right. Okay, everyone's muted right now, but you have the ability to unmute. So Dan brings up a good point. We're going to treat this sort of like a debate stage at this point, and I'm going to try to get the spotlight feature set up. But if you jump in and speak in the middle of the meeting, that's like, pulling a Kanye West and running onto the debate stage and interrupting. So let's try to avoid that if we can. Todd, I'm looking at you. Just kidding. Okay, so without further ado, we will get right started with our rent control board debate. So I'm pleased to welcome as the moderator for this forum, our programs VP, Melissa Goodman.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I hope you're all staying cool. I am actually not. So if you see me sweating profusely tonight, please forgive me. It is hot in here, but it's nice to see you all. And I'm just going to kick us off for all of our wonderful candidates who are here, just a little bit about the process of how we'll do this. Everyone will get a 2-minute opening statement. I'll call on folks randomly. I will call on candidates in a different randomized order for each question. I have a special bot to do that. Thank you, John, for introducing me to this fun little app here. You will get 1 minute to respond to questions. We will tell you when your time is up. You will probably be shouted out that it is time. And then in the course of responding, if a candidate invokes another candidate by name in some specific way that might warrant rebuttal time, I will give the candidate who was named 30 seconds to respond if they want to. So that's how we'll roll. And we're aiming for roughly 20 minutes here, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm just gonna dive in. And I'll call out folks in order to do opening statements. I'll start with Kurt.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's time and the opportunity to talk with the group here. My name is Kurt Gonska. I'm a candidate for Santa Monica Rent Control Board. I've been a resident of Santa Monica in rent-controlled apartments since 2014. I'm originally from Chicago, the suburbs of Chicago, where I was born and raised, and where I went to school for my undergrad degree at DePaul University. Originally in college, and then for several years after college, I worked on political campaigns, always for Democrats, running for various offices at the federal, state, and county levels, mostly in Chicago, but also out on the East Coast a bit, also here in California. And the last big race that I ran was in Omaha for a Democrat running for the US House there in that election cycle. So after political campaigns, I got into the entertainment industry, first working at a Hollywood PR firm, and currently I work at Dick Clark Productions. So my sort of introduction to rent control issues, to tenant issues, landlord issues, was just my own personal experience living in rent-controlled apartments in Santa Monica. So both at my previous building and my current building, I had different problems with landlords and got in touch with the rent control board, with the staff to get help. And through those processes, I learned about all the amazing rights that tenants have here in Santa Monica. And unfortunately learned a lot about some of the pitfalls that exist when either laws are abused or when tenants don't know their rights. And so what I'm really anxious to do is to help my neighbors, fellow residents here in Santa Monica navigate that process, because we do have really amazing, strong rent control laws here in the city. But if people don't know what their rights are and if they don't know how to exercise those rights, they're not quite as valuable. And in addition to that, is that time?
It was time.
Okay. Well, I look forward to talking to you guys all more throughout the evening.
Yeah. We don't like to rudely shout at folks, but it moves it along. I should say for the candidates, if you can see John, he has a timer that's on his screen and it'll count down from the amount of time you have, if that helps. All right, I'm going to go to Danny next.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Danny Ivanov. I'm running for the Rent Control Board, and I am an attorney and a renter that lives in a rent control unit here in Santa Monica. I got notice of a 6% rent increase, just like about every other renter here in Santa Monica. And one of the main issues that galvanized me to run in this race was a recent proposal by the City Council that would have attempted to essentially undermine or gut rent control here in our city. I'm very thankful to the membership for this club for last minute organizing a Save Rent Control rally, and which beat back that proposal. And as an attorney with experience in litigation, advice and counsel matters, negotiations matters, I think that I have the skill set and experience to be an impartial voice on the board, and handling disputes between landlords and tenants, as well as handling any other complex issues that may come before the board. And I think as a renter that lives in a rent control unit myself, these issues are personal to me. I live these issues every day. So I think that that experience will empower me to serve as an advocate for my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Ericka next.
Okay. The reason this is my first time running, and the only reason why I'm running is so I can help my neighbors. It's since the pandemic, I've been out in the community just helping people apply for the Housing is Key grant and making sure that our neighbors know what their rights are and how they can obtain those funds so they can stay in their units. As the pandemic took place, I had a desperate need to make sure that everybody was okay, from going out to giving people food and just helping people apply. I've also watched my friends struggle to try to stay in their apartments as they were elliced out of them, and how they had to go through. And one of my friends was so thorough, almost like an attorney, and that inspired me also to help people to make sure that they could stay in their homes as well. I'm here to just help my neighborhood and my community. I'm not very much of a talker, but I'm more so committed to what I do everywhere that I sit. So I'm committed to make sure that our neighbors stay in place and keep a roof over their heads. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right, I'm going to dive in. So each of you has, and you've alluded to it a little bit in your opening statements, you have a different personal and professional background. So what in your personal and professional background makes you well suited to effectively fight for tenants' rights, to keep rent control strong in Santa Monica, to enforce rent control laws and make policies that protect renters? For this one, randomizer says I start with Kurt again.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I like you just mentioned, I touched on it in the opening statement, but I have a background professionally of working in politics, working on political campaigns. So I understand how to navigate those really relationships that it takes to both with constituents, but also with other elected officials, with city government employees. So I think that's number one. But also it really, I think in a position like this, and frankly, in a lot of political positions, it really comes down to your passion and your commitment to what it is you're fighting for. And I wouldn't be in Santa Monica without rent control. A lot of my neighbors on both sides of me wouldn't be able to stay here after 30 years in rent control units if it weren't for that strong law. So I really understand the value personally, and I really truly believe in rent control as a public policy. So I'm going to be a strong fighter to maintain what we have and to fight to make it even stronger.
Thanks, Kurt. I'm going to go to Ericka next.
So in my personal life, I'm already a community health worker. Housing is a health issue. Just to have a roof over your head, that, especially during the pandemic, is essential to keeping the public health in place, to make sure that everybody has a roof over their head. We have enough homeless people on our streets, as you can see, and without a strong rent control law or order as we have, you would add to that. I really need for us to keep these laws in place, and also to make sure that the people that are on the streets also acquire housing as well. And I hope I answered your question thoroughly. If I didn't, just let me know.
Thanks, Ericka. All right, I'll go to Danny.
Yeah, so again, I would reiterate, my experience as an attorney, I think will be a very beneficial skill set. I don't believe there's other candidates in this race that are attorneys, so I think that will be a useful and diverse perspective on this board. I believe we're all renters, and I think that's going to be obviously a very important characteristic as we're going to fight for our fellow renters in the community. And actually, similar to Kurt, I've worked on campaigns all across the country, back in Illinois, where I grew up, in Florida and DC. I think working on those campaigns has helped my skills in terms of communications. So as a member on this board, whether it's through social media or other tools that the board uses, I think that experience is going to help me better communicate the rights that tenants have and better inform the community.
Thanks all for sharing that about yourselves. Next, despite having one of the strongest rent control laws in the country, many Santa Monica rent control tenants still don't know all of their rights or don't feel safe speaking up and enforcing their rights. So as a member of the rent control board, what would you do to improve renters' knowledge of their rights and create a climate where people feel safe from retaliation when they speak up? I'm going to go to Danny first.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's understandable that people don't know all of their rights as tenants, because obviously people are busy. They have, all of their different obligations going on with work, family. So it's understandable that people don't have time to read all the fine print of their lease agreement to know what rights that they have as tenants. Our responsibility as commissioners on the board, something that we can do is, again, whether it's through social media, we have to, echo and better communicate the rights that tenants have. In terms of what we can do to make tenants feel better that they have allies on the board is, we all as commissioners need to make sure that landlords are not screwing over tenants. We need to make sure that that landlords are not screwing over tenants. And so once members of the community and renters see and know that they have allies on this board that are fighting for them, they will then feel more comfortable asserting their rights as tenants.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Kurt next.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would reiterate a lot of what Danny said. I think we're on the same page there. A lot of this comes down, and first of all, I think that the commissioners who are on the board now do a really good job of communicating with the public, especially when things come up like rent increases. But we can always do more. And one thing I'll look at, and I'll be really curious to look at, is this year the registration fee went up slightly, and the board doesn't do that every year. They do that every 4 or 5 or so years. And with that sort of timing in mind, they plan for the ability for that increase to cover, budgets for the next 4 or 5 years. And so I think here within the first couple of years, hopefully there'll be some extra funding now in the budget that we can use to do even more communication with residents. Because like Danny said, like I said earlier, really tenants understanding what their rights are is the very first and most crucial step. Because if they know what their rights are, if they know how strong the laws are in their favor, they'll be more confident to enforce those rights.
Ericka.
So I have to reiterate what the two, Kurt and Danny, said. Tenants do need to know their rights, and that's of utmost importance. But it's also important for tenants to understand that a couple, that I also have lived experience as far as having been harassed, having to go through and try to adjudicate my rights as well as a tenant. Lived experience also lets them know that I'm not just speaking from a place of hierarchy, but also a place where I'm relatable as well, so they can understand and stand up and feel more empowered.
Thanks, Ericka. All right, I'm going to take you all in a different direction. You all, in your questionnaires to the club and your interviews, stated that you support Measure RC, which would permanently lower the rent control general adjustment cap from 6% down to 3%. What will you actively do to help ensure it passes this election cycle? And what will you do to protect rent control tenants from excessively high rent increases if the measure does not get enacted? And I'm going to go first to Kurt.
So I think the first thing is that over 70% of residents in Santa Monica are renters, and many of those are in rent controlled units. So I think that, I think there's a very good chance that this will pass in November. But that said, we can't just take that, we can't assume that it'll happen without us all doing our part to make sure that it does. So with every voter that I talk to in this campaign, I'll be talking about that reduction to the 3% cap. When I was out and going door to door collecting signatures to get on the ballot, it was just within days of people getting those increased notices, and it was top of mind for everybody. And I think it will be through November. So in addition to talking to people, to informing them about the fact that that's on the ballot, I think it's important that people understand that there is help right now, that city funds that are available for people who can't afford the 6% increase to get us through February. And I know my time's up here, but I just want to say lastly that it's really important that we spread the word about that availability if people do need help, just to make it until that ballot measure goes into effect.
Thanks. And I know it's a double question, but if you can try to fit in both parts, that'd be great. So I'm going to go to Danny next.
Yeah, so I think obviously all three of us support this measure. I think we've all made it a central tenet in our campaign. So I think we are doing a good job of communicating this issue. And as Kurt said, I had the same experience when I was, speaking to members in the community and collecting signatures to get on the ballot. People were aware of the 6% increase. They're upset about it. This is an issue that they're really aware of. So I do think that this ballot measure will pass. Again, we can't take that for granted. I think one thing that we need to do as a board especially is for next cycle and for next year, it's very likely that there could be somewhat of a similar increase, given that inflation is still going on and it's unclear when we're going to get back to pre-inflationary levels. So what we need to do as a board is we need to see that coming, and instead of hopefully getting caught flat-footed like now, we need to create an action plan months in advance before that happens.
Thanks, Danny. Ericka?
Well, as far as the rent increase, as I've been going out, not so much as collecting signatures, but as soon as people received the notices and they were very upset, you take that anger and you use it as a force for people to take action. Say, have you received your notice? If you're angry about it, make sure that you vote in the November 8th election to make sure that this doesn't happen. And until then, tell them the resources. There's resources from the LA County, there are resources from the city for them to help just in the interim between now and February for them to get access to. Thank you.
Thank you. So you will all be charged with protecting and administering rent control. And, that's what your body is charged with. The city council is charged with making sure that we have sufficient affordable housing. How will you interact with the city council to ensure that the two separate elected bodies work hand in hand on these separate, charges that each body has? I'm going to start with Kurt.
The first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question was watching some of the city council meetings that happened over the summer. There were certain council members that I think they actually were speaking with the rent control board's general counsel, and one of the council members made a comment like, "I don't even know who you are. I've never heard of you before," and that's a real problem. That is, an elected city council member didn't even know who the rent control board's general counsel was. So the first thing is just communicating, and I'm not putting any fault on her for it's the council member's fault that you didn't know who she was. But if they're not going to take the initiative to meet all of us, to spend time getting to know us, to understand what our priorities are, to understand how we can work together, then I'm going to take that initiative and hound them until they put me on their calendar, until they sit down with me, because we need to build that relationship with the council members, especially those who may not be natural allies for rent control.
Thanks. Ericka?
I think that communication is key. And in that communication, we have to also reiterate how important it is for us to have affordable housing. Not just to have affordable housing just for the sake of it, but also have units that are equitable, that people don't have to throw out half of their things to move into. Or our city has to have more units. As Patricia made that great announcement earlier saying that we are now in compliance and we are moving forward, we have to do so in an equitable way. And the only way we can do that is to reach across the bridge to speak to city council members as well, to make sure that these things stay intact and make them understand how important rent control law is for our city and for our residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Ericka. Danny?
Yeah, so even though affordable housing, isn't really in our jurisdiction as rent control board members, this is an issue that I'm very passionate about. I believe in having an all of the above approach to attempting to, help the city meet its RHNA affordable housing targets. Some ideas that, I'm a proponent of are using more city-owned land, just like we did with parking structure number 3 here downtown, the market rate development housing, which those goals we are meeting. Of those developments, we need to fight to have a bigger percentage of those units in those developments, to be affordable housing units. So again, even though this isn't in our jurisdiction as rent control board members, this is an issue that I'm very passionate about, and anything that I can do to advocate for these issues, push back on the council, work with the council, that's something that I will do.
Great, thank you. All right. This, I believe, will be our last question for you all. It's a twofer. So first, what are the biggest challenges to keeping tenants in their homes in Santa Monica right now? And do you feel that Costa-Hawkins and or the Ellis Act need reforms? And if so, please give a concrete example of a reform that you would push for in this position. I'm going to start with Ericka.
Okay. So as far as Ellis Act and Acosta-Hawkins, Ellis Act needs to be reformed. We need a longer time of the unit being empty, if not inhabited by the property owner themselves. And I'm sorry, could you please repeat the first part? Because when you do a 2-4, it's like, wait a minute.
That's why we shove a lot in there. Big picture, what do you think are the biggest challenges to keeping tenants in their homes in Santa Monica right now?
Knowledge of renters' rights, landlord harassment, and of course, inflation. We can't forget about inflation. And as the 6% came across our city, the harassment from landlords not taking tenants' rent that have resided in their units for over 30 years. That is a big boundary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to go to Danny.
So renters are facing a lot of threats in our community. As Ericka stated, you have Ellis Act evictions, we have the vacancy decontrol provisions of Costa-Hawkins, and unfortunately, we also have reactionary forces on the city council, which I mentioned in my introductory statement with their proposal that they attempted to push through just a few months ago to essentially, gut or means test rent control in our city. In terms of a specific reform that I would like to see is if we could fight to reform, if not outright repeal, the vacancy decontrol provisions of Costa-Hawkins. I think that would be a very helpful reform. As I'm sure most of you know, those provisions, when a tenancy ends, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, a landlord can then put that rent control unit on the market at the market rate, usually. And what that does is it almost creates this perverse incentive to engage in eviction. So that would be a concrete reform I would really like to see implemented.
Kurt, you can close us out.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Ericka and Danny said. Something in addition to that, I think just number one, affordability and rent increases from year to year are a big problem. And so like we've talked about tonight, reducing that cap by passing the ballot measure down to 3% will be a big help in that regard. But when people are forced out of their apartments because they can't afford it anymore, it's obviously devastating for that person and that family that's being forced out. But it's also devastating for the community in general, because then that unit is going to be back at market rate, and it's going to be very unaffordable for many, many people, except for high income earners. So that's a huge problem. Specifically, one specific thing that I am very interested in and would support is amending the Ellis Act to require that landlords own a property for a longer period of time before they're allowed to remove tenants to take the building off the market. And I think that would help to cut down on building speculation and on rent controlled units being converted.
Got it. Thank you. All right. I'm going to give you all 1 minute to just wrap it up and do a closing statement for all of us. And Ericka, I'm going to start with you.
In this year, after this pandemic, we have seen an astronomical amount of homelessness, of people being displaced from their homes, people being harassed by landlords, people unsure exactly of how they're going to make it. And with the resources that we have from the county and from the city, it's more important than ever to make sure the rent control law stays intact. It's been under attack even from our city council. As a rent control board commissioner, I can assure you that I will do my best to make sure that our tenants can stay in place and that equity is at the forefront of our rent control law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ericka. Danny.
Yeah, so thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to speak here tonight. And, I would just reiterate that, again, I think my experience both as an attorney as well as a renter that lives in a rent control unit myself gives me the unique experience and skill set to be a successful and productive member on the rent control board. And it would be an honor to earn the endorsement of the membership. Thank you.
Kurt.
I'd also like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us, and hopefully you'll support us and help advocate for us this November. But I think something I said early on, I think is really important, which is that I think this job requires a real passion for this public policy. It's a very specific and narrow focus for the board. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity within these set of issues, but it's a very specific set of issues. And I think that people, like I can definitely speak for myself, and I think I can speak for Ericka and Danny here, that we need people who are passionate for this public policy, who are going to fight for it because it's the right thing, because it keeps our community, it keeps all the best things about our community in place. And Santa Monica would be a very different place if it weren't for rent control. And that's why I support it. And I think we need to do everything we can to defend it from those who want to chip away at it. So hopefully I'll earn your support.
Great. Thank you to all the candidates for answering our questions and taking the time to be here with us tonight, and all of you for listening. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you for hosting.
Peter, you took the words out of my mouth. Thanks so much, Melissa. Great job moderating. 3 great candidates, and we really appreciate you guys all coming by and speaking about the campaign.